let's talk about a little Drake May here because that's when things get a little spicier. Brady, I'll come to you first. You and Rick both have Drake as your QB2. I have him as my QB3 behind Jaden Daniels. We'll get to Jaden in a second. So is this a situation, Brady, where you have to go back and watch 2 years of tape as well to be convinced that Drake May is who he's going to be?
I think so, at least in my opinion. It's really tight between the two. I just think they're two different players. Jaden has such an incredible dynamic ability to take off and run with the football that it's hard not to look at that and say, yeah, he probably should be in today's NFL when you see Lamar Jackson win the MVP this past season and not sit there and say he's probably the second best quarterback in this draft class. I've kind of lumped him and Drake May almost together. That's how tight it is. The film wasn't great this year from Drake May. I thought he was a little bit more inconsistent with his accuracy. There's reasons to be made for that. UNC's defense hasn't been good the past 2 seasons, really. He didn't have the same set of wide receivers we're talking about, like in Brian Thomas Jr. and Malik Neighbors, who will probably both go in the first round. And so that obviously plays a role as well. But he's still, I think, can play from the pocket. I think can play, process as far as seeing downfield. I think he's got plenty of arm, probably a little bit better than Jaden Daniels. But by the way, not by much. Again, we're talking about small differences between the two, but clearly Jaden's a better athlete. But I don't think Drake May's a bad athlete. So I've got these two really, really tight. I think the eyes and the beauty of the beholder in this case. And I would put Drake May softly by ahead of Jaden Daniels in this case. And I think it honestly has a little bit to do with just Jaden Daniels and who he was throwing to. I think if you put Drake May in that system, he's probably putting up some really good numbers as well. That just wasn't the scenario for him in North Carolina.
Hey, Rick, one of the things that we've talked about Drake a lot. Actually, Brady, I think I talked to you about this on HQ a few weeks ago. I don't want to make the Justin Herbert mistake with Drake where his last season at Oregon wasn't great and you sort of had to read between the lines.
Justin got better and better and better, though. I would say, if anything, when you look at this season for Drake, it's probably a little bit of a step back in some ways.
Okay.
So and I'll say this. I don't think Drake May is as physically imposing or, as compared to Justin Herbert. When you walk down and see Justin Herbert in person, that is a large human being. And that ball, when it comes out, whistles. Neither Jaden Daniels or Drake May is in that category in that regard. So there's not as much of an Adonis effect, if you will, in that comparison between the two. By the way, my comp for him was more, he's a more athletic Carson Palmer. That's kind of what I saw in regards to what I think he potentially could be. Just kind of looking back on some of that.
Hey, Rick, what'd you think about Drake when you saw him on the set? Did he strike? He didn't strike you as the Justin Herbert physical type?
No, but he's big. He's bigger than I thought, more developed than I thought too. When we had him on set at the combine, horrible pickleball team. I'd love to play him against pickleball against the people. I would just take anyone who had an 80-inch wingspan or longer and play pickleball with them because you can't get the ball around those guys. But the things with Drake, the only thing that because I watched him play live against Miami 2 years ago, and I was really impressed just with his demeanor and the way he throws the ball. And I think he's an underrated athlete. I think he is a good athlete that can make plays. I think the biggest things that I saw was the do too much mentality this year, trying to overcompensate for the lack of receivers that he had. And Trez Walker didn't play till halfway through the year. He didn't have anyone else to throw to. The offensive line did not protect him very well. So I think he was trying to do too much. And the other thing that kind of stuck out to me that he's going to have to learn is that the pre and post snap reads, I think sometimes he gets a little hesitant in a pocket if the defense changes the look on the back end a little bit. And he just tried to force too many plays that weren't there and trying to, like I said, overcompensate for things instead of just playing within the scheme and system. But I think they just were under talented compared to what he had a year ago and the way he played a year ago. But I think this guy has huge upside.
Hey, Rick, I know you didn't ask Drake the same questions you would ask him in an interview. Any similarities, though, just in terms of demeanor with Justin Herbert, who I think you talked with pretty extensively a few years ago?
Now, again, I'm going outside the box thinking on my comps. And I
just mean in terms of their demeanor, because they're not.
Yeah, no, I would love to have them sit there and why in the hell you're throwing it when 3 guys are on this guy?
I get that.
So there would be a lot of negative plays this year that we would have brought up that said, tell us your reads, tell us what you were thinking, and why would you do this? And just it'd be interesting to hear his responses.
What did Justin say when you asked him those questions a few years ago?
Well, Justin, we didn't. I think we had cousins, so I don't think we spent time with.
Okay.
Justin.
I thought. Did you talk to him at the Senior Bowl at all, or not at all? I thought maybe you said you. Okay. All right. Go ahead. Get to your comp then, because you're pretty excited about this out of the box. I can't wait to hear this one. This is a Ryan Wilson comp. I feel it coming on.
It is. I went into the Ryan Wilson mode on comps.
Oh boy.
With the length and a little bit the athleticism and some of the arm, I thought he had a little bit of Trevor Lawrence in him.
You've been saying Trevor Lawrence since September.
I know, but everybody keeps ripping me. Brady hasn't heard Trevor Lawrence.
No, the
I have. That's an interesting one. I think that could be fair in some ways. You know, I think Trevor Lawrence has a stronger arm. And it's interesting, like, you know, as far as the processing goes, I didn't see him in college when he was at Clemson have as much of an issue with the picture changing post snap. You know, I thought really when their initial year when he won a national championship, he saw a lot of that in the national championship game, and I thought adjusted well. So that's it. That's an interesting comp, you know. And I haven't seen Drake Maye in person. I have seen Justin Herbert.
I went based off the movement skills in the pocket and the little bit similar type athlete that can make some plays with his legs.
The one thing I would say in difference in, because I a lot of times pair it down to throwing motion, like how I kind of see the ball come out of their hand. And I would say, like, for my comp with Carson, he's a more fluid passer, in my opinion, than when Carson was initially coming out.
Carson was a little bit robotic, wasn't he?
Yeah. That's why I said I think Drake Maye is maybe a fair comp in the sense of, you know, some arm strength, what he's capable of. But obviously Drake Maye is a better athlete, but size-wise as well. With what you're saying with Trevor Lawrence, I thought the one thing about Trevor Lawrence is he's kind of a longer-legged guy, longer strider. I don't see that with Drake Maye's throwing motion quite as much. I think he gets his front foot up and down pretty quick, which is important. You know, one of the things for me, like, was making an adjustment when I got in the NFL, and not to get off on a huge tangent, but like the way you were taught how to throw the football, you know, more of that over-the-top motion, and especially for longer, taller, you know, guys, you're going to stride a little further. At least that was what you were kind of coached to do or taught to do young, and those are your mechanics. You know, when you got in the NFL, those pockets get tight. And so a lot of times you need to keep a little wider base because you're not going to step as much. You're really just going to turn. And that's where the evolution of the throwing motion is, where it's a lot more rotational and almost a little bit lower of an arm slot because of how you're going to spin to kind of throw. It actually plays better to a tighter pocket or a collapsing pocket, so you can still get the football off, as opposed to stepping into a guy or not having enough room to step to throw. So that's the only difference I'd see between the two. Is I don't think Drake Maye is a big strider when it comes to that. I think he's got a little tighter action with that. And then again, this is just comparing Trevor Lawrence coming out to maybe, you know, where he is now too.
My quarterback coaching before I got moved to linebacker, because was everybody, it was like, always throw from the ear. You drop back and you put it at your ear. Old Penn State backledge.
They used to always teach it too, to hold the ball up, right? Like I remember looking back in high school film, I was like holding it back here. Like, what am I doing? You know, like then you get it back down on the chest plate and the way you carry it. And then I get it. Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, we got to fake like you're passing. Oh, because that looks natural, right?
You have to make that noise too. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
I mean, anything that can spell it. Like I remember when we'd have like a reverse, or whatever else. You know, you'd be handing off, flipping the way, we'd be like, oh, boot, naked, like anything you could to try to sell the defense, just so they could hear someone yelling something.
By the way, Rick,
draw.
Yeah.
And then
I'd be dropping back on a draw, yelling, pass.
You guys are giving away the secrets. By the way, Rick, when I was talking to Brady and Leger for the Pick Six podcast, I don't know, a couple months ago, I asked Brady the hardest time he ever got hit. And speaking of like short pocket, like tight pockets, it was Pat Williams coming right off of Kevin Williams. Sorry, coming right off of Star Caps.
Yeah, it was back in 2009. It was like Brett Favre stole the show. Well, two things. Adrian Peterson had a huge game against us, but it was Brett Favre's first game in Minnesota, and he started off in Cleveland on the road. But what flew under the radar was I think Pat and Kevin Williams both were suspended, and they appealed a Star Caps suspension. And they were able to play that first game. I remember thinking to myself, this is not going to be fun. You got Jared Allen on the edge. That was already an issue to deal with. And then you got those two guys in the interior. It was a mess. It was tough.
Your fault, Rick.
Adrian maybe had one of the angriest runs I've ever seen along the sideline, where I can't remember who he threw someone out.
It
of
was
the
Brandon
park.
McDonald, our cornerback.
Yeah.
I mean,
Brady
I
called
remember
him out.
seeing that, being like, "Oh God, this is not going to be good."
I'll never forget that game. I remember that.
Well, good. It came at Brady's expense, but okay, Rick, enjoy it. Enjoy the memories. All right. How high could Drake May get drafted? Any chance he goes number 1, Brady?
I don't know about number 1. I think he goes number 2 at the highest. I guess there could be a scenario where I don't know. Maybe it's hard to tell just because of the way the picks would work out. I think Washington would be fine with him at number 2. So I can't see him going any lower than 2. I think Caleb Williams is the consensus number 1. If Chicago was going to trade out of the pick, like that would be a team would trade up to that pick for him. I think he's that good. So
Okay.
I don't see him going any higher than 2.
Hey, Rick, how low?
3. I don't think
No
he gets
lower than 3?
Yeah. I don't think he gets past New England. Especially they just traded Mac Jones for a 6th, down to Jacksonville. They have to get a quarterback out of these top 3. And then I think this guy, and Brady, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I have more respect for you than Pete trying to correct me on my theories. So, but I think with Alex Van Pelt at the offensive coordinator position in New England now, that Drake May would be an ideal fit if he fell to, and that's why I don't think he would fall past 3.
Yeah, it's funny when you bring up like the fits and we were doing this activity, I was kind of racking my brain of the different rationale. Like I like that, but honestly, like I look at all these guys, I'm like, well, it's not so much how they fit with the coaching staff now. Like that was when I was drafted, that was what it was. Like you got indoctrinated into a system, you had to learn how to drop back again, you had to work on whatever it was to fit the rhythm and timing of the offense. To me, like Alex Van Pelt, if he goes to New England, is going to be working with like, hey, Drake, what concepts do you perform best at? How do you see the field? What plays, do you excel or do you feel most confident and comfortable with? So it's so much more, I think now today, in my opinion, building around the talent you have, as opposed to trying to find those players that fit the system you're working with. I could see that making a lot of sense though, for him being in New England. I put Atlanta down for this reason and this reason alone. You've got different variations of guys to throw to, which he didn't have at North Carolina, right? You've, got your Kyle Pitts, you've got your Drake London, you've got, Bijan Robinson in the backfield. You've got weapons and who knows what else they do in the draft or free agency. So I was kind of looking at it from a standpoint of what team needs a quarterback, what team has weapons for him to throw to. Washington falls in that category too, to some degree, but I kind of looked at Atlanta. I was like, well, clearly it's a need, and clearly this is what he was lacking. And so that could kind of make a good system fit, scheme fit. Zach Robinson is going to run a similar system to McVay and Kevin O'Connell. So I think he'd fit well in that as well.
Rick, I'm going to ask you a weird question. Try to be patient with me. Let's say Drake May is your QB 2, and then JJ McCarthy is your QB 3, for example. It doesn't matter. Would you trade up to trying to get that? And let's say there's a half a round difference, however you grade that between the two. Would you trade up from, if you're the Vikings at 11, for example, would you trade up to 3 or 4 for Drake May if he's your QB 2?
Yeah, heartbeat. If he goes past New England, someone's going to trade up to go get him.
Okay. Now, let's say he goes up the board.
If Atlanta thinks, and that's assuming, depending on what happens, if Kirk Cousins ends up there or not here in a couple of days, that this whole dynamic can change.
Yeah. But
if he's at 4, he's not going to continue to drop. Someone's going to get aggressive to try to come up and get him.
So you're not even hesitating.
Especially with Arizona at 4, they would be in a heartbeat trade out of that 4th overall pick to get more picks as they rebuild that program.
Okay.
So
I think the Giants are the other team to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
Like, sitting there at 6, like they could be a big mover. Atlanta obviously could be as well. We know their desire to get a quarterback, but we'll see what happens with Kirk Cousins in free agency first, I guess.
All right, Debo reminds me, Rick, hold on to your hat here. That game that Brady got hit the hardest he's ever been hit in his life. Adrian Peterson, 180 yards, 3 touchdowns.
Yeah. Yeah, Brett was still getting used to everybody. That was his first game as a Viking, as Brady said. So we just gave the ball to the horse and let him see what he can do.
All right.